Growing up in America in the 20th and 21st century through the prism of the African American experience has been an ever-evolving landscape that would span over 500 years, reflecting through the vast African American contributions to Western art, science, and the law. In 1868, African Americans became people by law as the 14th Amendment reversed the Supreme Court ruling in Dred Scott versus Sanders. Howard University School of Law was established in 1869. Illiteracy decreased. The African American professional class grew exponentially. The country was once again at the crossroads. The promise of social, economic, and political inclusion was close. However, the political tide turned. Reconstruction ended. The troops were removed. African Americans were once again vulnerable to hate, terrorism, and jealousy. The African American journey in the 20th and 21st centuries reflect a determination to force America to live up to its ideals. Black civic organizations, sororities, fraternities, and community groups were established to assure advancements in education and economics despite racism. And to understand America, you need to understand the Black church. A brilliant legal strategist, Charles Hamilton Houston, dedicated his life to overturning Plessy versus Ferguson. Houston's protege, Thurgood Marshall, successfully argued the case in Brown versus the Board of Education and won. In 2009, President Barack Obama became the first African-American U.S. president and the third African-American to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Today, African-Americans are astronauts and doctors and Supreme Court justices, as well as chief executive officers. For the African American journey is one of perseverance, self-determination, and a quest for justice. The African American journey is America's journey. Today, the Insider exclusive Justice in America network TV series is on location in Baltimore, Maryland, to take you behind the scenes in this new network TV special, Mark Darden III's story, a partner in the Law Offices of Addison-Darden, which he formed with his mother, famed civil rights lawyer Olivia Addison Darden, to share his wisdom, hope, and hard-won legal experiences, which have earned him a reputation as an unyielding trial lawyer who repeatedly represents clients against big companies and the Goliaths of the world and repeatedly wins. Mark is an American success story forged in the traditions of perseverance, self-determination, and a quest for justice. He has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Maryland and across the nation. He has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down, and his amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide the firm's clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Baltimore, Maryland. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mark Darden to the show. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, Mark, today you're a successful lawyer, but that didn't happen overnight. It started way back when you were being raised by your mother, who's a very well-known civil rights lawyer and has been for many, many, many years, and you're in partnership with her even today for the past, 30 years?
For the past 35 years. We'll be celebrating an anniversary in just a couple of weeks in April.
So take us back to how you became the person you were from an early age, and you lived in diverse neighborhoods, that the demographics were changing all the time. And also what your mother and your father was what was his profession?
He was an automobile equipment mechanic, but first he started off as an airline and rocket propelled mechanic.
Okay, so how they instilled in you not only the way you think, the way you act, the moral structure that you have, but also the perseverance and the dedication that you bring to your profession. Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, well, first I want to tell your audience a little bit about who we are at the Law Offices of Addison-Darden. Mm-hmm. And that is a mother and son law firm. A lot of times you'll see a father and son firm, or a couple, husband and wife, or you may see, but very rarely do you see a mother-son, and especially an African-American mother and son firm. We may be the only or one of the earlier ones in the country. And I'll give you a backdrop of how that happened. But right now, we concentrate mainly on personal injury, mass tort, and truck-related accident cases. We started off as a general practice, handling a number of cases in varying disciplines of law, from just your regular tort civil suit to dog bite cases to accident cases to criminal cases, murder, attempted murder, robbery, rape, you name the gambit. And I also did a fair amount of entertainment law when I first started. That's sort of a joke. I started off in elementary school playing the guitar. That didn't work. I went to the drums and 8 other instruments. So I've always had a love for music and song. So I represented a number of different local area artists, some who've gone on to do very well. But with that being said, we started to narrow down our practice. As you indicated, sometimes as attorneys, you can get so focused on different areas of the law, put so much into it, but yet it is still a business. So you have to be able to make sure you keep your lights on at the end of the day. So we've started to narrow our practice as to the areas of practice that we're in right now. A lot of that came from my upbringing. My parents met one another in high school. They were high school sweethearts. My dad went off to the Army, and my mom had started college. My dad came back from the Army. He grew up on a farm in Arnold, Maryland, and learned a lot of his automotive skills there, repairing tractors and equipment, just his creativity. While my mom was in college, he worked as a mechanic at Grumman Aerospace, and then he worked for another large airline, and always had aspirations of owning his own business. So in the early 70s, he had an opportunity, and he opened his first automobile repair shop. I probably was about 3 or 4 years old at that time. I do remember it. That business came, went. My mom then was a school teacher because she was a biology major at Morgan State University, and she was in the teaching field. My dad then got another job, and he opened another shop. He opened another business. That one I remember very well. I remember the day it opened, the open house, and at that time I was about 10 years old. And I used to work with him when he would go out to the junkyards early on a Saturday. And so those were my first impressions of what it meant to work, and to work hard, to get up and work, and to provide for a family. I worked with him in and out of his shop probably until my teenage years. And that was an experience, again, where I learned so much about business, even though it was a small business, learned a lot about business and how he ran his books. My mom would actually be the person running the books as she went into law school. She went from teaching into law school, from law school to helping my dad, and then moving into the areas of practice that she's in now. So I've always had a firm foundation in family businesses. And once we moved to Howard County, I actually grew up in Baltimore City, moved to Baltimore County, then to Anne Arundel County. For any of your listeners who are familiar with the Maryland area, that's the central Baltimore area. And we moved a lot, for what I thought was a lot as a kid. But every time we moved, it was an upward mobility that brought about a different understanding of people, and brought me into communities that were different from me, and it gave me a broader appreciation and perspective of culture. And I think, and I know that has translated into how I treat people, how I look at people, view people, listen to people, and ultimately in this business, try to help people. Again, in my younger years, living in Baltimore in a neighborhood that was pretty much probably 90% African American, 80 to 90%. It was what I knew. Visiting my parents, in particular my mother's community in Annapolis, Maryland, that was the culture. That's what I knew. And it was odd because in Baltimore, I'm in a city environment. When I would go to Annapolis, that area of Annapolis was more rural, even though it's called Annapolis, and we would call that the country. So, I grew up in the city. I spent a lot of time in the country. And so that would later come to help me in my teenage years. But as we moved and my parents changed jobs and moved, it brought me into other communities in the Randallstown area at that time, which had a high concentration of Jewish people. And I had an opportunity to get to know, I'm going to school with a lot of Jewish kids. And so I'm getting to know different things about their culture, the similarities between my UMYF and their Hebrew school. I'm going to birthday parties and bar mitzvahs and things of that nature. So I'm getting an opportunity to share my experiences and understand theirs. I've always wanted to learn. So I'm always one to learn, to ask questions. And again, I think later in my life, those things helped in the development of who I am now. So as growing up in Randallstown, there was also a larger Asian community that began to move in with the influx of Vietnamese students that were coming from Vietnam. I don't want to use the term refugees because I can't remember what the classification was, but I just know that we had a large influx of Vietnamese students, and I got to know them just as well, experiencing going to birthday parties, trying to, communicate, and then sports tied into a lot of that as far as my younger years in development. And the Randallstown community started to change. We had then an influx of Latino, Puerto Rican, and Dominican families that were moving into the neighborhood. And so, again, I just wanted to learn. I, always wanted to make friends. And that really helped. My high school years were quite different. We moved to Howard County, which was very rural at that time. And I love the idea of being in Howard County, but at the same time, many of the friends that I had to make new friends in an area where friends meant I could walk 2 doors to the right or to the left or across the street, and I'm, having fun. I'm playing with my friends. When I moved to Howard County, my nearest neighborhood friend was a quarter of a mile away in the same neighborhood, and that quarter of a mile was through the woods in order for me to get to his house or for him to get to my house. And moving into that rural community was an adjustment, but not quite so much of an adjustment because, again, my father was raised on a farm. Going to the country in Annapolis, going to Browns Woods, was also more or less a rural experience. And so I had an opportunity now to intermingle with some students who many times probably didn't have as many African Americans in their classroom experience as other areas where I had gone to school. Glenelg that's the high school I attended, was a unique experience. It allowed me again to understand and not just blend in, but to educate those persons who I went to school with about who I am, about my African American culture, juxtaposed against a Western Howard County rural experience. And it was a rich experience. It was a good experience for me. I've made lifelong friends through that high school experience. But that's when I really started thinking about what am I going to do when I grow up? What am I looking at as far as a career? If you had asked me in elementary school or junior high school, it would have been being a professional football player. You asked me once I got to high school and I got to Glenelg, and our average line as a JV football team was 6'3", 250 pounds. I realized that speed was my asset, but size-wise, unless I grew, I probably was not going to be in the NFL. And then that again was another influencer for me. I started playing lacrosse, and that sport led to a lot of opportunities for me, which again, one building block upon another building block upon another building block, this is who you have today. And so lacrosse really gave me an opportunity to expand as a student my academics, and to expand in the athletic arena, and then also into just networking, higher education, and on to law school. So it was in high school that I realized a lot of my classmates were following the careers of their parents. And at that time, my mother was a prosecutor in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. My dad was still a mechanic, still turning wrenches and doing his thing. He was building vehicles. Now they've got shows where guys are building trucks and making a lot of money. My dad was doing that years ago before it was any money in this whole restoration and reconfiguration, retrofitting of vehicles and stuff like that. And he and I used to have a lot of fun doing that. But with all that said, my question was, what am I going to do? What is it that I like to do? I loved competition. I love sports. And I always had an opinion about something, and I always advocated very, very hard for that opinion if I thought my opinion made sense or if it was right. And so I looked at what my mom was doing as a prosecutor, and I decided about my junior year in high school, I wanted to be an attorney. That's what I pursued at that point. I really got serious about my schoolwork, and at around the same time, I started getting offers from colleges who were looking at me for lacrosse. And with that in mind, I realized that the first 2 years of high school, I didn't take it very seriously. My mom always told me, she said, if you put half as much of your effort into your academics as you do your sports, you're going to be an outstanding student. And that didn't click until about my junior year. And so my junior year I spent studying, making up for my freshman, sophomore year. My senior year, no prom, no junior prom, none of that stuff. I really spent the last 2 years of my high school studying and getting my grades up. I was fortunate enough to be pursued by a number of colleges to play lacrosse, and I ended up playing at Hobart College in upstate New York. Went to Hobart, was a part of 4 national championship lacrosse teams, which opened a lot of doors for me. My Hobart experience, again, was another building block. Just meeting students from all over the country, many from the New England area, but just all over the country, when varying, political ideas, varying cultural experiences. And that allowed me to take a semester abroad in Egypt. Again, another building block and experience. Things that I had heard about on the news about persons from the Middle East, I get there, I experience it. I say that's not quite true. Being a people person, trying to help people along, it has helped me as an attorney. I listen. I try to absorb information. I try not to give an opinion until once I hear all of the facts. And that's how I basically interacted with people from the time I was in elementary school, having to change schools several different times, junior high school, senior high school, on to college. And now I find myself in a profession and in a career where I'm able to help people. But the first thing I need to do is listen and understand what their issue is, what their concern is, how I can help them, how I can assist in facilitating what it is that they need when they come into the office.
There was an experience that you had in, I think, your first year of college that turned your life around even more to God, right? And what was that experience, and how has that shaped your outlook in helping people?
Yeah, so an experience I had in college, my sophomore year, that really brought me closer to my relationship with God was I had made our lacrosse team as a freshman. Lacrosse and Hobart are like Alabama in football. It is the holy grail of lacrosse. I mean, you have, Hopkins, Cornell, Hobart, Maryland. These are schools where lacrosse is paramount. And I spent so much of my efforts in lacrosse, making the team, and looking forward to my sophomore year being a breakout year, only to find out that I was the only freshman required to then try out for the team again as a sophomore. So although I had made it as a freshman, I'm thinking my position is secured. I'm told, Skip, and that's what most of my friends call me, most people know me as Skip. I'm told, Skip, you got to try out again.
And why is that?
There were reasons for which I would rather not discuss, but some being my views, and just some I to this day don't really know. But nevertheless, it brought me to a point where I just had to ask God for guidance to allow me to be the best student I could be if this thing with lacrosse wasn't going to work out. Which was a blessing. I had my highest grades my sophomore year. I was just super focused and disciplined. Just God blessed me and said, look, you trust in me, these things will work to my good and you will benefit from it.
In other words, when you were looking to God for guidance, you basically said, I may not understand how this is going to turn out, but I'm just going to trust.
I'm just going to trust you. Exactly. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I had to go through this, why I had to suffer through this. It was an embarrassment.
How has that revealed itself later in your life now, even in your career?
Well, I had a second epiphany like that. I took the bar exam and didn't pass it. I took it my second time and missed by 1 point. Took it a third time, missed by 1 point. Took it a fourth time and missed by 1 point. And on the fifth attempt at the bar exam, I got into a Bible study with a senior pastor that was mentoring me. And I just turned that over to God. Again, why am I going through this? Why am I being persecuted? And when I passed the bar that fifth time, I passed by 1 point, which told me that I should cast all my cares upon him and he will provide. And that's what I do. I mean, when I go into court, I pray. I pray with my clients. I don't know what religion they are all the time, but I do, and I look for that guidance because I don't always have the answers. I have to appeal to a higher authority.
I would probably say that people who look to a higher power, a God, right, probably can honestly say that oftentimes, sometimes, you never know where the answers might come that help you successfully, right?
That's what I carry as my confidence booster. That belief in God, the belief in Jesus, that He will answer my request.
I am guessing that, I often ask this question to lawyers that we interview: how do you select your clients? I am guessing that that same insight comes to you when you're evaluating a potential client about whether you want to take them on or not. Because I hear this time and time again: I have to like the client. I have to like his story. I have to want to get involved with it, which really says to me what they're not saying is I have to believe that not only is their cause just, but I believe in this person, right?
There are a number of times when when I evaluate a case, I feel for the individual. I think we can help them, but we have to have an honest conversation as to what is it that you're looking for? How can I be of assistance to you? And can this relationship work? Sometimes we do have to turn clients down that, again, the facts and the law just don't come together. Or either there's information in there that I have to be frank with them about that is not always going to champion their cause. And so we have to be upfront and deal with those. And you have some clients that have realistic expectations and some that have unrealistic expectations. And that's when you have to have those type of talks up front. Because if I don't meet the criteria that you're looking for, and there's some things in the middle there that we know are going to present some issues, then maybe, we're not always the best fit. We're not looking for always an easy win or the best cases, but we're looking for good cases, good clients, and we work with that.
Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing because your clients benefit from it. And I'm glad you have that perception, that attitude of let's work together and let's seek the truth, because that's what it's all about, right?
It's about seeking justice. It's about, taking the abstract and funneling it down to what's the bare essence of what we have.
I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing a very personal interview with us. And I'm glad we're here today.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.